Hey everyone, welcome to Flywheelpod, your number one source for everything Frax, DeFi, and everything in between. If you want to know what's going on in the world on chain, you've come to the right place. This is DeFi Dave, here with capital K. We're here to help you harness the power of the flywheel. And Kiet, we had a very special episode with the founder of the Defiant. I think her reputation precedes her, honestly, Camila Russo, on. And it was just a very informative hour and a half. We really learned about the high standards the Defiant has in both their coverage and what they cover and why they cover it.
Agreed, man. And you can just hear it that Cami has such strong journalistic principles and values. And that's just so much respect, right? We see a lot of influenza in the space that pretty much just says one thing and then turn right around and click on their ledgers and just dump on retail.
Yeah.
And it's great to hear that she prides herself and the rest of her team too, right? So the Defiant will never front run you, which is
and I think both with the Defiant and the Infinite Machine, her book, like she's really has set a gold standard, like a really high bar for all the crypto media to follow, both whether they're traditional outlets or influencers and commentators on Twitter.
Yeah, and she even shared what it takes to be featured or actually written about on the Defiant, and it's just to be genuinely newsworthy. Period.
Yeah, exactly. And we have a lot more of that in store. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, hit that bell for all the notifications you need. Follow us on Twitter at Flywheelpod. Join our Telegram group at Flywheelpod. You can follow me on Twitter at DeFi Dave 22.
And you can follow me at 0x_K.
And let's get the flywheel spinning. Hey everyone, I'm very proud and honored to have Camila Russo on. Camila is the founder of The Defiant, one of the leading crypto news platforms out there. She's the author of The Infinite Machine, which is, I think, the ultimate book about Ethereum. And I always say it's a required read for anybody that wants to get into crypto. You have to read The Infinite Machine. And she's a former reporter at Bloomberg, and she's just doing so much. So, Cami, thanks for coming on. Big fan and also proud contributor to The Defiant myself.
That's right. Thanks so much, Dave. It's great to be here. And thanks for the really kind intro.
Of course. Yeah, so, I listened to your interview with David Hoffman in the past, which kind of gave, an introduction to yourself. And I want to get into that briefly. So I'm wondering, how'd you go from being a mainstream reporter at Bloomberg and actually, wanting to start a crypto division there to just starting your own platform itself?
Yeah, so it was all pretty gradual, actually. So I was a Bloomberg news reporter for 8 years. I covered all sorts of markets, equities, bonds, FX in New York, Buenos Aires, and Madrid. But, I wrote my first story on crypto in 2013 when I was in Argentina. And it was just this one story, but since I was kind of living with inflation and currency controls myself when I was there, I kind of immediately saw the value of having an independent currency and was interested in crypto ever since then. And so 2017, I was in New York still with Bloomberg, and crypto was blowing up, and I took the opportunity of covering crypto on a more kind of daily basis. And, as I was covering the space, it just seemed so interesting, so fascinating what was happening, that, nothing could really compare to writing about crypto. So I just didn't want to leave the space and just stayed. And that's right. I did kind of propose to my managing editor that we should create a crypto team. I, of course, wanted to lead that team. They didn't think it was the right time. And, meanwhile, I was thinking about writing a book. And so I was pitching this book about Ethereum. That's, 2017. And then 2018, I was writing The Infinite Machine and while at Bloomberg. And so it just it became clear that my interests were shifting towards crypto and also just wanting to be independent, after 8 years in the same place. I just thought, it's time to do something different. So I left Bloomberg in January of 2019 to finish writing The Infinite Machine. And, the original plan was to be a freelance writer, writing about crypto, tech, finance. But then, that changed when I came up with the idea of starting the Defiant.
Yeah, I'm curious. In 2017, you really saw the hope and promise of crypto in a time of ICOs and lots of vaporwave. How did you see past all the vaporwave to see what Ethereum was truly about, which really came across in the Infinite Machine?
Um, I saw that Ethereum was a platform that allowed developers to create many different applications. And it was clear to me that, ICOs were one of many potential ways to use Ethereum, but that at its core, Ethereum was providing this innovation for blockchain tech that hadn't been here before, which was the ability of having this programmable money, this baked in programmability into the base layer that Bitcoin didn't allow. And it was the first time that a blockchain was trying this. So that to me was pretty groundbreaking. And yeah, I thought, sure, like ICOs are kind of the first kind of big breakaway application, but it won't be the last.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny at the end of the Infinite Machine, you kind of hint at something called open finance, which ended up becoming DeFi. I guess like when open finance started becoming a thing, like what were some things that you were noticing, and like at what point did open finance become DeFi? Because a lot of people don't know that open finance was a thing. And were you surprised by the name change?
Yeah. Um, So yeah, at the time, like both names were like being discussed and used interchangeably. Finally, kind of DeFi won over. I it thinks like I think it was just like more marketable. It's like and it just like caught on. But it was just like very obvious to me. In my kind of research of the Infinite Machine, just like going to the hackathons and conferences, that this was something relevant and important that would continue growing, whatever it was called. Like this ecosystem of like protocols and financial applications. It was so different. Speaking of ICOs, like so different from the ICO boom. It's like you had actual working applications and users. And it really did start to seem like this new parallel financial system was being built. Yeah, it was pretty mind blowing to just like see it emerge pretty much from scratch.
Yeah, and you're seeing this back in 2019?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, like when DeFi first really like made sense and clicked with me was in 2020. And the fact that you can run, like you said, run these applications on chain was really a 0 to 1 innovation. You didn't have to like go to like a centralized exchange. You didn't have to worry about any counterparty. Like it was just all done with smart contracts.
Exactly. Yeah. It really was something that it was totally different from what we've seen before. I mean, things like Compound, Aave, Uniswap, you know, being able to lend and borrow crypto permissionlessly in a non-custodial way, being able to trade in a non-custodial way, in a way that was easy because there were DEXs before, but they were just
Yeah.
extremely hard to use.
Ether Delta.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, you know, that kind of the ease of like using Uniswap and plugging into MetaMask and, then like going to Compound and depositing, whatever USDC, earning interest without having to like deal with anyone else but a smart contract. I think that was like a light bulb moment for many of us in the space where it was like, okay, like
Mhm.
this is something different. Like this is new.
Like
Yeah.
Cami, I wanted to ask you, is it because you come from 8 years at Bloomberg where you're like super deep in traditional finance, so that when you first used, DeFi, the light bulb was so much larger for you because you saw how everything worked previously, and you saw like how bright this future could be. Would you say that helped you see the vision of DeFi more?
I guess it could be. I hadn't thought of it that way, but I did have a lot of background in traditional finance, obviously, in all sorts of markets, and kind of I know how inefficient traditional markets are. All the clearing and settlement times, and how things work. Like even just like simple things like making transfers in traditional finance, how that takes days, and all the intermediaries that go into TradFi. So yeah, I had been kind of covering all that ecosystem for years, and even in other places, like from the US, but also from South America, and also in Europe, and just like seeing how massively bureaucratic and inefficient the system is. So the contrast with DeFi is just extremely stark.
Yeah, it's like night and day, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, at what point did do you think, in your opinion, did DeFi really hit critical mass among like those in crypto? Like we say, like it's DeFi summer, but is there a specific moment, like before DeFi summer or during DeFi summer, that was like, okay, DeFi is here. It's a force and it's here to stay.
That's a good question. I think I was covering the space since 2019, with the Defiant every day. Like I launched the Defiant in June of 2019, and from then on I was like writing the newsletter pretty much on my own the first few months. And at that time, DeFi did seem super interesting, super dynamic. Like there was tons to cover every single day, but it was very niche. Not a lot of people kind of were paying attention to it. I think it was the start of DeFi summer, definitely kind of where it kind of grabbed like just broader attention, and where you at least saw DeFi being covered in crypto media, because before then DeFi wasn't even being covered by CoinDesk, or um so it was probably, to me, like the start of DeFi summer was the launch of Compound, the Comp token. That was kind of what triggered this mad run for TVL by others,
Free money,
and yield
basically.
farming, and
Yeah,
all those token
all those games.
incentives, and 1,000 or like 1,000,000% APYs, and all that
Yeah.
craziness that came after. I think that was probably what kicked it off.
Yeah, I think the first time I heard of DeFi in the news was the BZRX flash loan that happened months prior to that.
Mm, yep,
That was the first time I heard of it, and I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And it was everyone's just like studying it because it was the first type of exploit of that kind. And then
exactly.
I remember when I was at Everpedia, Everpedia had a prediction market at the time called Predict, which was on EOS. And I remember Everpedia, we wrote a blog post saying like Everpedia is like shifting more to focus on DeFi. And this was like 2 weeks. It was in early June, 2 weeks before Compound announced their yield farming program, their incentive program. So I remember in June when it started to happen, and it was just like, whoa, like we can do all this stuff on chain. And then, you realize like, wait, Uniswap exists. And then from there, you just saw like, my first experience really using DeFi on chain was messing with synthetics and using their
Mm,
platform. It was like, wait, like I can like go into like these synthetic markets like this and that. Like I had no idea like how to manage the collateral ratio to this or that. Like I feel like those like using DeFi that haven't really used traditional finance, it was like learning finance from the ground up, which is really cool about it. And then what memories did you have from DeFi summer? Like what parts of it like really stuck out to you?
um, so yeah, that kind of comp token, it really took me by surprise. I remember, um, I had a contributor at the time, Sebastian Aldazoro. Uh, he he told me, hey, like, do you want me to write this up? And I said, yeah, sure. Like, write up, there's something brief. I just like, to me, it's like coming from kind of the ICO days again, like just thinking about, just like a protocol launching a token. Sure, like it's interesting, but I never expected it to just go off the way it did. And then seeing kind of how it was driving, like it was like hundreds of millions of TVL. Like just like people were flocking to this because of the token incentives. I never expected like such just like an immediate and also just massive reaction to that. Um, and uh, and from there, like I don't know, like other moments. I think just like thinking about like the early DeFi days in general. I think like one of my favorite stories is the Uniswap Sushi Swap drama. That was so fun, like the vampire attack, and how all of that played out, and that whole kind of debate on how uh, loyal and how much of a mode communities are, and how crazy it was that Sushi was able to port a lot of their of Uniswap's liquidity over to their new platform because of these token incentives. That whole story is, I mean, to this day, I think is one of the most fascinating stories in DeFi.
Yeah, and the drama
yeah.
behind it
Yeah.
with oh my god, I can't believe Chef Nomi. With
Yeah.
Chef Nomi like leaving and then returning the funds.
Yes.
And then
That was
and then
insane.
Uniswap, they felt like they were kind of like on their toes and needed to be reactionary. And then they came with the Uni airdrop,
Mhm.
and then that started the whole, airdrop.
Yeah, and then the Uni
Yeah,
airdrops for like its all whole new
home thing.
airdrop movement.
Yeah,
Yeah,
its own category of like airdrop and
exactly.
airdrop hunting. So the ramifications and
They're
consequences of
huge.
Uniswap and Sushi and the whole Sushi Swap fork, like we still feel to this day because so many other protocols copied that. Whether it's like the the Master Chef contract for farming, or
Mhm.
like you said, like the whole airdrop meme. We still see the consequences of all that.
Yeah, no, it was a huge story. I thought it was fascinating how that played out. And then just like on a lighter note, I remember the like all the food tokens, food
Yeah.
Yeah,
bars. That
yeah.
was just
Yeah.
hilarious. It was just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
so DeFi.
Yeah.
I just
I
remember like
mhm.
the unhealthier the food token, the more likely it was as a rug.
Right.
I just remember like I call that period pick your favorite food emoji season. And that's
Yeah,
just,
yeah. It was like it was it was like a mix between like emoji mania and food tokens. Remember like Yam?
yams,
Yeah.
I
that's
think like
right.
Yam Finance was like one of the first food tokens, and probably what kicked kind of the whole thing
Hmm.
off. And then like everything just got more and more bizarre
Yeah.
from there.
So, so Cam, I wanted to ask you, as being basically the only media at the time that is like heavily looking into DeFi, do you feel it was imperative that you also kind of degen into some of these pools and experience it firsthand? Or did you just kind of stay on the sidelines and observed mainly?
I definitely like tested them out, like I tried stuff, but this is something that unfortunately it's not in me to be a trader. Like I don't know. It's not my nature. And I think I kind of like I wish that I
I
was.
got you.
I would do a lot better in this space. Um, like I'm early to so many things that I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I'll write a story instead of like investing in it. But yeah, like of course, like I I was experimenting with all these things, and just like because you need to actually use this stuff to understand how it how groundbreaking it is, how different it is from the past. But it wasn't like degening into like, it wasn't like yield farming or, spending like any kind of big like relevant amount of my own money in DeFi. It's like I'm a buy and hold sort of person. So it's like, yeah, I hold ETH, I hold like stable coins and in like Compound and Aave, and like you're like maybe earning a little bit of yield here
Right.
and there. But no, very very far from a degen.
That's awesome. All right, guys. The Defiant would not front run you. They do not. So they'll give you the info and actually they let you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
know.
no, I think
I mean, it's kind of it's a big part of our like ethos. We're not investors, our thing is just unbiased, objective information. Um, it's how really I want the Defiant to make a difference in this space. We're not, and there's just like so much bullshit going on, like pumping and
Mm-hmm.
dumping outlets, like influencers, like dumping on their audience, on their followers, media outlets that are really like PR firms that are being paid for coverage. Like so much of this is happening. I just think, DeFi deserves better. We need to raise the bar, raise the standards. I'm bringing kind of all of the standards that I learned at Bloomberg, 8 years there, where as a Bloomberg reporter, you can't touch whatever you're covering. So I bended the rules a little bit. Like I do hold crypto. Um, and I think because I think it's important to kind of have skin in the game to, again, like understand what
Mm-hmm.
you're writing about. So I've um I've modified Bloomberg's rules to our space, but there's still kind of this hard line where we're not investing in, we're not actively trading in what we're covering.
Yeah, and actually, this leads into my next question pretty elegantly. Um, what is the state of crypto media today? How well do you think the space is doing covering stories both at a news level, like with the Defiant, and also, you have your classic Twitter threaders and commentators on there. Like, how well do you think everyone's covering things? What do you think people are doing right, and what do you think people are doing wrong?
Yeah, great question. So okay, so I think crypto media, or like crypto coverage, I should say, has improved so much since 2017. Um, at the time, you had mainstream media covering crypto very superficially. Almost no one had a dedicated crypto team, and there weren't many dedicated kind of industry outlets either. And now you have seen the space for crypto information mature to a place where mainstream media does have um, dedicated crypto teams, and that's just elevated the quality of coverage. So like Bloomberg does finally they kind of have like built its own crypto team. Fortune has an incredible crypto team. The like FT is like very anti-crypto, but at least they put out interesting stuff. Uh, you see a lot of like really in-depth coverage from mainstream media, like um New York Magazine has had crypto on the cover, like Time, The Economist, like pretty much every major magazine or news site has kind of, uh, you know, looked and deeply into crypto now. Um, Still a lot to improve, but I think we're just like so much further than we were. And then kind of the crypto specific space. Has gotten a lot more options. Like before, it used to be pretty much, CoinDesk. Then the block came, and Cointelegraph has also been around for a while. But now there's a lot of more specialized coverage going on. So you have like NFT specific sites, obviously, DeFi. There's new kind of generalist sites like Blockworks. So I think there's a lot of options out there for news coverage, where I think there there has to be improvement is on financial coverage, and that's what the Defiant is focusing on. And for that to happen, we need better data. So I think that's kind of where the big gap is right now. Right now, it's really hard to get access to reliable, standardized data, especially on DeFi and Web3, in a way that's easy to analyze, that's comparable. It's like you need to have like dozens of tabs open to keep track of the space. There's lack of historical data. Um, and that leads to bad quality reporting, especially on like financial markets. It's like, you know, to cover DeFi and Web3 markets well, you need the raw material, which is data. And data is just lacking very badly. And so that's what we are building at the Defiant. We're building a data platform that's focusing on DeFi. And so that we hope will dramatically improve the level of financial reporting in the space.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely a race to standardize data in the space. And I'm wondering, I've heard there's like a few difficulties with that, like coming up with standards because every protocol is different in how they, whether how they account for revenue or how they account for certain things. So how does the Defiant like go in? Do they have to go into like each white paper and figure out like, okay, this is how this works, or like, okay, this is how that works, and how they account for like this certain thing? So how does like the Defiant deal with all that?
Yeah, it's super hard. I mean, there's a reason why you don't really see a lot of the information out there. It's such a huge problem. It's like we're building this financial system, and a key part, like a key infrastructure for it, which is information, is not there. Like you just don't have data for it, or it's locked for very technical people who are able to actually go into the smart contract. So it's like we're supposed to be building a more inclusive, democratic, open financial system, but information for it is the opposite. It's very exclusive. Um, and so, yeah, that's what we're trying to fix at the Defiant. And up until now, it's been very slow because it is like about going directly to like each smart contract, like figuring out how each protocol works. Like our uh, developers and data analysts have to like just like ask the projects directly to make sure that we're being accurate. So it's a very kind of manual, slow job. But once we have our MVP out there, like our terminal that we're launching by the end of the year, the way to scale, I believe, is being like fully Web3 native and growing together with the DeFi community. So that means instead of relying on our centralized team to aggregate all this data, we will include the DeFi community, DeFi developers, DeFi projects who want to be a part of the Defiant terminal to add their data themselves. And I think, this will be a great opportunity for DeFi projects themselves who want to get their information out there and to want to see their data be known. And of course, it'll be great for end users who now will have access to this data very easily, in a front end that doesn't require any coding, that lets you just, just with a search bar, create these charts, no SQL queries or anything. So yeah, I'm super excited for that.
Yeah, last week we had 0xD24 on, who's an Anon threader. And that is one of the things he said, like something that's absolutely missing from DeFi is data and visible data, and having like a way to read the chain and analyze projects in a sufficient manner to make decisions, especially for institutions. So I definitely see this thing becoming more and more of a trend. And I find it very full circle how you went from Bloomberg, which has the Bloomberg terminal, and now you're building your own Bloomberg terminal of sorts. It's really full circle.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, It's kind of like a Bloomberg terminal, but with the huge difference that Bloomberg terminal is all about being very closed, very exclusive. It's a $2,000 a month subscription. We will always have a free side of the Defiant terminal. Like we want people to access this data very easily, and just like unlock all this information for the community. Of course, we'll have like different tiers of subscriptions for more functionality and so on from there. But that's a big difference. And then the other difference is just like the community-led aspect of it, which, I think it's kind of the Web3 forward way of building a data terminal.
For me, like, Cam, I mean, I applaud you for trying to solve this like a mega issue. Dave and I talk about it all the time. We hide behind the banner of like transparency, right? The blockchain is open, everyone can come in, but it'll be as if like you received a library card to access the library, but then all the books are all over the place, non-alphabetized, and you could go look for each book on each
I
page.
love that
But
analogy. Yes.
Yeah.
that's how I
There's
feel.
there's no Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah, there's no Dewey Decimal
Yeah.
here. But what I wanted to get your thoughts on is like in crypto, we can't even decide what is considered revenue and what is an expense, right? Token Terminal classifies it this way. Folks over at Mezari classifies it another way.
Crypto fees too.
Yeah, crypto fees as well too. So do you feel that we need some kind of like gap standard across the board? And if so, does that gap standard come from the community kind of imposing this, or do you think all the projects come together and create a consortium to create a gap standard? Where do you see us going from here?
That's a really interesting question. I think, these things have to come from the bottom up for them to be effective. Like they need to come from the community. Otherwise, they won't be legitimized. It's like you can't have an organization come and say, okay, like I've united kind of the biggest brains in the space, and we've come up with this, and this is what we'll do from now on. Like I just don't think that's the way things work in Web3 anymore. So how I believe things will evolve is that you'll start to see the community kind of gravitate towards one sort of definition more than another, in the way that you've like seen happen with like things like TVL. It's like, okay, for some reason this metric has really caught on, and like now everyone is every protocol kind of reports it on some way or another, and so we'll in this way we'll start to build our own data standard system. And then I think from there, like once the community has kind of congregated or like there's been consensus around a group of data standards, then you can have like an organization come and just like compile what's already kind of emerged organically, and just like maybe put it in some kind of like centralized organization, or just like make it official. But it needs to come from the bottom up.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
It's like how Dune Analytics works. Like the community makes the dashboards from the bottom up. It's just the thing is with Dune is you have to know MySQL or like whatever they use to build it. This is like a little bit different because it's more like you said, it's no code.
Yep.
Yeah. I wanted to get back to crypto media. As we all know, like crypto moves fast. It moves really fast. I feel like if you work in crypto or involved in the space in any way, time just moves faster than normal time. And so my question is, how does the Defiant keep up with everything, what's going on? And like, how do you judge which stories to cover or not?
Yeah, that's a big part of our job, is filtering signal from noise. There's a lot of noise in the space. There's so much happening, and again, like that's a way that we differentiate, is that we don't try to cover everything in crypto. Like we're not crypto generalists. we are specializing in the on-chain economy. So, that's, I include DeFi, NFTs, DAOs. And so within that space, I think what makes the bar is seeing what is actually making an impact in users and markets. So, things like an announcement of something being launched, which we get all the time. It's very hard for us to cover that because it's not something that's making an actual impact. So I think that's kind of what helps us decide, okay, what we should cover and what we shouldn't cover. Something else that we've recently implemented to make sure that we're not missing anything is very basic, something that's used in all newsrooms, but it's beats coverage, which before, like, we're a very small team. We're 3 reporters and 2 editors. And, with a small team, it's hard to have beats because it's like, okay, everyone covers all of DeFi, NFTs, and Web3. But we started seeing, okay, like maybe we missed some big kind of development, some big vote on a big protocol, where if we had a dedicated reporter where, that's their responsibility, we wouldn't have missed it. So we, like, just last week made this change. And now reporters have their dedicated beats and protocols that they need to be focusing on. So yeah, I'm excited for this. I think it's going to help us stay on top of things, even more than we already are. But yeah, I guess, like, to answer the question more concisely, it's it's just having a strict focus. It's like we are covering the on-chain economy. So for things in CeFi to make the cut, they need to be like huge stories. It's like, of course, like Celsius. We covered that because it did have an impact in DeFi as well. But we're not trying to cover like everything that happens in CeFi or everything that happens in kind of like, institutions coming to crypto. That's kind of not our focus. So maintaining our focus, and making sure that we're covering developments that are actually making an impact and not just like any random announcement that comes on our inbox.
What are some beats that you cover?
So our beats, we have dexes, and within dexes, there's like specifically like Uniswap, Curve, SushiSwap, Xerox. Then lenders, there's NFTs and metaverse, there's infrastructure, so like Chainlink, the Graph, Gnosis. Asset management, so that's like Yearn, Olympus, Badger DAO, and others. Derivatives, so synthetics, CYDX. Layer 2s, Ethereum is its own beat, Bitcoin is its own beat, and then like alt layer 1s, regulation, CeFi, staking, and stablecoins. So that's a lot. So reporters need to stay on top of everything.
Yeah, Kit, me and you basically cover the Frax beat. We're like the grassroots Frax beat. Yeah. So we have, Cami, we have this weekly show called Frax Check, and it's once a week. And basically, Kit covers the on-chain data, and I cover the governance proposals. And it's just like a quick snapshot of everything. Honestly, it's actually super useful for,
Nice.
and like I've gotten a few messages of people appreciating it in the community.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think it's great to have that, that frequency really kind of just forces you to stay on top of things. And it's a great resource for news outlets to have something like that, for when we do want to cover something happening in France, to have that kind of primary resource with shows like yours.
It's all about communication, like you said, like making the chain legible. And like, I feel like every project could have their own like Frax check in a sense.
100%. Yeah, that would be super helpful.
And Cami, I wanted to ask, how does your team kind of stay on top of their beats? Like, are there special tools you guys use to, streamline, like TweetDeck, for example, or
Twitter,
anything like that?
people on Twitter that you follow?
I mean, yeah, it. I mean, I think that you'd have to ask kind of each reporter how they do it. But we have like a Twitter list that we follow. We have, I think, like the habit of just checking kind of what's happening in markets and on chain. So like I said before, there's like, a dozen different platforms that you need to kind of
Mm-hmm.
stay on top of to kind of understand what's happening. So we're in the habit of just like looking through those so that we don't miss anything. Reporters covering kind of specific protocols are in their Discord to kind of keep up what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
They're tracking the different project forums to see what's going on in governance. Um, what else? I think just like, yeah, Twitter is kind of I feel like the hub. It's like
Yeah,
the town square for
Mm-hmm.
DeFi
Mm-hmm.
and crypto.
exactly what I was gonna say.
Yeah. But it's about filtering, so it's like about using lists efficiently. Yeah, I think between Twitter, Discord, kind of all these data trackers, Reddit, kind of what's surfacing on Reddit. We use the Rect feed as well. And then we have like our own like editorial at the Defiant inbox, which is where we get all the like PR pitches and releases. So yeah, there's like a lot to filter through.
Yeah, I think filtering and having nuance is one of those skills in crypto that you just learn over time. It
Mm-hmm.
takes just being here for months, if not years, to figure out, okay, like what's legit, what's not legit,
Exactly.
what's newsworthy, what's not. And sometimes you think something is newsworthy, but it just doesn't hit. And then something that you're like, oh, that isn't anything, but for some reason it's a big deal. So sometimes it's like you're never
Yeah.
really 100% hit rate,
Mm-hmm.
but if you can just be like more than 50, 60, 70, 80%, like you're good.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. And you said that one of your beats is stablecoins, which is something I want to get into. So what is your, experience in covering stablecoins? Like and how it's perceived, how you've seen it evolve from, that first like stablecoin era at the end of 2020 until now. Cause, DeFi was like one thing, but stablecoins is this like, kind of like I how do I describe it? Like if DeFi is degen, then stablecoins is like ultra degen, honestly, because it's like either works or doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think stablecoins are, probably the most like one of the most important building blocks for DeFi as a whole. Like you just need these, this asset class to work for DeFi to work. You can't have just like these volatile assets, flying around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's hugely important. I think it's interesting to it's been interesting to see the development of what used to be essentially just Tether back in 2018 into this space with a lot more options. And I think, the big challenge has been for DeFi to find a more, censorship resistant and decentralized options to Tether. And then USDC started really taking off because Tether had this kind of stained reputation around just like lack of transparency behind its assets. So then USDC started taking off, and then Maker with Dai started becoming a lot bigger, and Dai was kind of the kind of DeFi stable coin, but then that started having its own issues when it became multi-collateral Dai. And so you did have, you know, all these other, centralized stablecoins backing DAI. And then, we started seeing all these other, experiments and alternatives. Obviously, Frax is one. I remember like Algorand being very early with its own experiment, like really interesting stuff like Rye. But it feels like it's gone from like centralized to trying to be decentralized, and then trying all these kind of like algorithmic or like crypto backed or like hybrid experiments. So it's a fascinating space, and I think it's fascinating because it's so key. It's for DeFi
Yeah,
to work.
it's so essential. Yeah,
Hmm.
like you said, it goes from first we just had centralized, just like, there's dollars in a bank or in treasuries, and then it's represented on chain. And then in the logical thinking was like, oh, how can you make a decentralized stablecoin? Hence the first version of DAI. But then after the whole Black Thursday in 2020, it was like, oh, wait, we need a scale. So we have to have centralized collateral, hence,
Hmm.
USDC backing it. And now, it kind of went like back more towards the middle between centralized and decentralized. And then you had decentralized experiments pop up again with
Yeah.
Rye, and LUSD. And then you had other scaling experiments of like, oh, like what if we instead of over collateralized, we can have a capital efficient, partially collateralized algorithmic stablecoin, which was Frax. And there was a bunch of algorithmic stablecoins out there, and most of them failed. I would say like 80-90% of
Yeah.
them just did not work out because of like the mechanics of it were really hard. And we have this
Hmm.
saying in the Frax community that there will be like one stablecoin design that like everyone will basically copy, and all roads will lead to that. And so far, the model's been all roads lead to Frax. And so we keep we've been beating that drum since the beginning. And like, Rome wasn't built in a day, Frax wasn't either. Um, but yeah, I
Yeah,
guess
no,
like
we'll
yeah.
see that play out then.
Yeah, so I guess like from your like bird's eye view at the Defiant, like how have you seen Frax evolve? Because I feel like a lot of stablecoins had their moment in the sun, whether it was like ESD or even like, Faye when they announced the raise, or if it was like Iron with like Mark Cuban writing his piece, or if it was like Mim with like everything they were doing for a hot second, and then like UST. And Frax has always kind of been in the background, just like building and shipping, and never really has been like the main character like any of those stable coins. And like they've either now all those stable coins are either just like not like blew up and are not here anymore, or like a fraction of what they used to be. So like what are your thoughts on that, and like those stable coins and how Frax has kind of evolved along that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, at the Defiant, because we have like limited bandwidth to cover, everything that's happening in the space. And we really do kind of want to, put in front of our audience what's really kind of moving the needle in the space. Uh, I don't think we've done a lot of coverage on Frax. And I think on the one hand, it's good because like when things blow up, then we cover them, so it means that it hasn't like really
Yeah.
just cratered. Um, like Faye, we covered kind of that whole drama. Um, so you've kind of had you said Frax was like growing and building in the background, and kind of taking kind of the best mechanisms and kind of building blocks of like what has worked. Um, so yeah, I think maybe kind of it's been kind of this build up until it kind of like breaks,
Yeah.
and we can have more coverage on it.
Yeah, so what do you think needs to happen for Frax to get there? And what do you think can help Frax become more digestible to your readers? Because it is complicated. Like a lot of people I talk to, when I try to explain Frax, it takes them a few times. Or if someone's like doing research, it takes them reading and going over things a few times and before like the light bulb to click. So I'm
Mhm.
wondering, like, is there like a way, like, how Olympus had like 3-3, or like, is there a way like Frax become more like memeable and digestible in your opinion?
Um, So I think, yeah, I mean, as much as you can simplify the kind of inner workings of something, and yeah, like I think memes are a great way. Um, so having something like a tutorial, or just like an explainer on Frax, we could do that at the Defiant, like, because we do have explainers on things that aren't news but are just like useful. um and then for us to like really cover it as news, like it just needs to be newsworthy. So and it just comes with protocols just like gaining more adoption. I mean, when I talk about things making an impact, and that's the bar that we look at, it's like how many people are using it. Is it being adopted by different kind of protocols? Like, is it being held by a lot of people? Is maybe kind of, can it hold the peg better than any other uh, stable coin? I don't know, like any of those kind of like superlatives or like adoption metrics that you can show that, okay, like this is newsworthy because it's standing out from the rest. Those are the things we look at when we're looking
Yeah.
to cover a
Yeah.
project.
Coverage is not, just handed to you. It's earned over time. Like, look,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
MakerDAO has been around for, I think, like 5 years now. And so they help pioneer so much of DeFi. And so
Hmm.
like they like have earned like the coverage that they're always getting. I feel like a lot of the Frax coverage from the Defiant has been from my guest articles. The one that I wrote last year, about, when like, Frax and actually Luna before, like way before, like a year before Luna blew up. And the
Hmm.
other, that was an interesting article because that was like algorithmic stablecoins or Satoshi's dream, since he wrote about peer-to-peer cash. I'm like, oh, like there's a clear parallel here. And then recently I had the Maker and Fraxar, the diplomats of DeFi one. And so like I always appreciate you letting me write my like guest articles and stuff. I have a lot of fun
Yeah,
doing
no,
it.
they're great, and like your conference coverage is always so good as well.
Yeah.
So
Oh, thank you. It reminds me of like when I was at Everpedia, I would basically like, I felt like a quasi journalist in a sense, kind of like a Hunter S. Thompson, because like I'm like part of the story, but like not the story. And like I try to remove my biases. And I'm just like writing my observations, kind of like how Hunter S. Thompson did. So at Everpedia, it was about like things I saw online. And so I got like I did that so much, I got like pretty good at it. And I just like apply that to when I write Defiant articles. I'm like, okay, this is my observations and stuff. And I think
yeah,
like
exactly.
my biggest challenge is like, I write my like ideas at first, but like trying to be trying to write different articles and like have a different subject matter from what I wrote previously, and also to notice like how things have evolved since my last article. I feel like,
Yeah.
when I wrote about Lisbon, like the space was at like a certain place, and now when I wrote about Paris recently, I was at a completely different place.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what makes things interesting, like seeing what's new, what's changing, um, what's whatever's kind of like uh catching people's attention, like what are people talking about, like all of that kind of like on the ground reporting. Yeah, super interesting.
I hope that there's more builders out there that, guest write for the Defiant or other news sources, because I think it's just, so important to get their perspective, because they're in it every day and in it working day in and day out. And so they have like a real different flavor as like compared to like maybe like traditional journalists or like someone else. So I think it's like really important to hopefully get that out there. Like I always say that my Defiant coverage is a labor of love, because I just like love
Yeah.
writing, and I love like trying to give people my perspective on things, because I think it's really important, especially when people look back on the space like 50 years from now, like or a long time from now, and they're trying to figure out like what exactly happened. And so it's like very important for them to get unbiased coverage.
Yeah, and that's kind of the difficult balance that we try to strike, because yeah, like I said, like we're all about providing objective, unbiased, professional reporting. Um, but at the same time, we do want to be more, decentralized and crowdsourced information. So it's like, okay, if you start incentivizing outside contributors to write for the Defiant, we still want to maintain kind of the same standards that we have for the rest of the site. But that many times it's hard to do with outside contributors who don't have journalism experience, who won't necessarily be objective in their observations. And a lot of people, when they are contributing to news outlets, they're not necessarily looking to, give you kind of just like a sense of what's happening, but they're in crypto kind of in the end, it's like they're trying to kind of sell you something.
Yeah.
It's what I found with a lot of kind of contributors. So that's kind of the challenge there.
Yeah.
But I definitely think there are ways around it, and it's something that we want to do a lot more
What do you
of, to have
what do you
outside
think
contributors.
what do you think those ways around it are?
The what?
Well, what do you think those ways around it are? Like the super
Oh
biased
yeah,
coverage?
just like just like being clear up front of like what the Defiant standards are, what we need, like the things that we publish, having just like a strict editorial process, just like having that back and forth between the editor and the writer, and yeah, just having a conversation where we can make sure that the final product just like meets our requirements for publication.
Well, Cami, I just want to ask, do you guys apply this same stringent kind of like benchmark around the sponsors that you work with too? Like how do you go about selecting that? As a up and coming media project as ours, like we'd love to learn how the Defiant filters through sponsorship engagements and such.
Yeah, great question. So we do filter sponsors. The main thing that we want to see is that the project is legit. So and legit in the sense that it's already live and working.
Mhm.
So we typically, with like, I don't know, maybe we've made like a couple of exceptions for teams that we really kind of know and trust, but we typically don't have any sponsors that aren't live and working. Even if it's like a token that's live, that doesn't count. Like you have to have like an actual working product, because otherwise, you get like a lot of fluff. So that's kind of like a hard line that we do. And other than that, like we look for some traction. We do kind of a check on like who the team is. But yeah, our main thing is like, is this actually live working? Does it have users? Is it kind of a legit project that's not just a token?
Yeah. And
Got it.
following up on that, like, when did you determine that it was time for the Defiant to monetize, and what ways has the Defiant monetized?
So yeah, it goes back to kind of when I first started the Defiant, again, like June 2019. I initially just, thought it would be a side project and that I would be a freelance writer and have this newsletter on the side. But then I saw that I could do this as my full-time job. So, I saw, okay, like people are actually willing to pay for the content I'm putting out. And so the first way of monetizing the Defiant was to add a subscription, like a paywall on Substack. And then I, started getting paying subscribers from there. And then next, projects started approaching me saying that they wanted to sponsor the newsletter. And that was a hard decision because, again, like I did not want there to be any sort of perception of conflict. But I decided to go for sponsorships because I I would be just very clear on what's sponsored and paid for and what's editorial. So at the Defiant, we don't do any paid editorial content. So all of the content that we're putting out is because it's newsworthy and important, not because somebody paid us to cover their project. And then all the sponsors are clearly marked, like they are banners on the newsletter that says these are our sponsors. They are a section on the podcast that it's me kind of reading out the sponsor message. It's Robin doing the same for our YouTube videos. So there's like a really, really kind of, hard kind of line and wall between what's editorial and what's sponsored. And I think that's really helped us, be able to just not have any kind of conflict there. And that's the main like two ways that we monetize up until today. It's subscriptions and sponsorship revenue.
Got it. And I also see that you guys are pretty chain agnostic too. I see a lot of other L1s here. Like, could you walk me through your process on deciding that, like, hey, we're going to be more than just ETH?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of very clear to me from the start. Like, this is about the on-chain economy. It's about this new financial system. It's not about ETH. A lot of it is happening on Ethereum. So yeah, like a lot of our coverage is about Ethereum itself, because it's such an important, obviously, foundation for DeFi. So it's relevant to it. But if there's, activity happening on any other chain, absolutely any other chain, like we don't discriminate. So I like when kind of the alt L1 started taking off last year, we did get some flack for covering kind of finance smart chain. It's like, this is not CeFi, it's centralized, and it's like, okay, but there's still activity happening here. There's like development, there's projects, there's users. Like you can't deny that. You can debate kind of how centralized it is, but it's still a part of the space. And yeah, that's kind of our approach. We're absolutely chain agnostic. We are kind of Web3 maxis. Like that's our focus, our niche. Like that's where I believe the most interesting kind of developments are happening. But as to kind of where they happen, we'll just cover the space wherever it's happening.
Yeah, and to this day, BNB is one of the largest ecosystems, but it's kind of its own island, or at this point, it's so huge. It's like its own like continent, honestly.
Yeah.
And like I saw your article, like there's gonna be ZK BNB, that's gonna be on top of that's like a layer 2 on BNB chain, which is interesting to see. So all these different chains are evolving.
Yeah.
I guess like on question on alt L1s, like what was your vantage point of seeing like the whole alt1 hype cycle phase? Like all of them came out, they all had kind of their incentive programs, and it kind of followed like the path of DeFi summer, whereas like everybody rushed to a chain, they were yield farming, and then they just like moved on to the next thing. So what was your take on like the whole like L1 rush?
I think L1, the whole space is still extremely early. And it's the fact that liquidity is so fickle, and that people were really just looking to farm tokens rather than actually use these chains, is proof of how early the space is. But that doesn't mean that something meaningful won't come out of other layer ones. I think it definitely will. I think there is a need for other kind of maybe features or priorities, I guess, that Ethereum does differently. So maybe some protocols do want to optimize for speed and cheap transactions, and not so much for security. So I think there's space for developers and protocols who want to just like prioritize things differently, because not all projects have to be built the same or be for the same kind of users. So I think kind of so far, what's been built on other layer ones hasn't been so meaningful compared to ETH in my opinion. Like, I haven't seen that much innovation happen. It's been a lot of like copying what Ethereum already does, and maybe doing kind of I mean copying what some Ethereum based projects and protocols do, and maybe doing some just like incremental improvements here and there. But I don't think we've seen something that's completely new start from a non-Ethereum layer one. I think maybe that'll be kind of the next step for layer ones to grow. Instead of just like being a place where people can just like farm tokens, they'll have to just like provide something that's, you know, many times better than what people can already get on Ethereum, for people to just like meaningfully be meaningfully using other layer ones and not Ethereum. But I don't think we've seen that in a big way yet. I think, you know, maybe kind of in some isolated cases, like, okay, Solana NFTs are taking off, or maybe there's like a game somewhere else. So we're seeing kind of like green shoots of it. But yeah, not like a huge wave of innovation.
Yeah, I guess speaking of that, what's your take on the whole debate between the monolithic blockchain versus modular blockchain debate? So you have like Ethereum with this one chain with rollups, and then you have Cosmos with all their different chains with an IBC, and also I guess Polkadot in that regard as well. So like, do you think there's like a meaningful difference there?
I think that the difference there is on how each model solves for security. I think that's kind of the big question, right? It's like, with Ethereum, it's pretty clear. Like, all of the rollups and layer twos get the same level of security because they are, you know, basing all their transactions back on Ethereum layer one. And Cosmos is different. Like, each chain has to have its own security, but now they're doing an upgrade so that they all have their shared security. But I don't know if that's already live. I haven't kept track on that. But in any case, kind of the shared security on the Cosmos ecosystem is pretty new, and obviously much less tested than for Ethereum. And then for Polkadot, as well, it's how like each I'm blanking on kind of their term for like the
Parachains?
individual. Yes, like
Yeah.
how each parachain, they do kind of get their security from Polkadot. So I don't know. It's like it's a really interesting kind of scaling model. I think for Cosmos, it's worked out really well. Like, they've had some just like great, like, incredible success stories. I think kind of Luna was like I guess like most famous one. It at least like it didn't kind of implode because of anything related to Cosmos.
Yeah.
And it did kind of show that, you know, the level at which something like that, a Cosmos chain could scale. So, you know, there's like the crypto.com chain is also on Cosmos. So they do have some like big kind of success examples. We have yet to see that. I think for Polkadot, it's pretty early. And of course, like for Ethereum, rollups, I think are very promising, but I don't know, the whole kind of UX issue there of like going between chains is still extremely painful. So yeah, I think it's those main issues that need to be tested and solved. It's like shared security, and UX, just like the hassle for users to go from main chain to like parachain or side chain or whatever roll up, and between those, nobody has really figured that out yet. Like it's even for like people who are in DeFi and using it all the time, like doing those like using those bridges is really not straightforward. Like
Yeah.
like the space is not going to be able to go mainstream that way, at least like how it's looking right now.
Yeah, not only that, but as we've seen with like several hacks in the past, especially
Yeah.
with like Nomad, Harmony, I've like lost count of them. Like bridges are like the weakest link
Yeah.
of Web3.
Yeah.
You know,
Ironically.
ironically, you have these like rickety bridges that like you never know when they're gonna fall apart.
No, yeah, you can't have that.
Yeah, no, I guess like what what do you think are ways to like increase adoption on like different rollups and all L1s? I guess one way simply would just be if centralized exchanges and on ramps, fed directly to the rollup or the alt L1. But I wonder how much of it. I feel like just as the Defiant needs like a project to reach critical mass for it to have coverage, like a chain or rollup needs to hit critical mass for them to have adoption like that.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think on ramps are key. Yeah, it comes down to, again, like security and UX. Like you need to have users feel safe, that they're not gonna lose their money, and you need them to just like be, just easily be able to move their tokens, move their fiat onto these chains.
Yeah. And so it's pretty obvious you've had like a pretty, on the ground vantage point of crypto and DeFi and the on-chain world for years now. In like the coming months and years, where do you see the on-chain world going? Where do you see DeFi going? And like, where do you see the coverage of it heading as well?
So I've said this before, but I fully believe that finance and just the internet will be more and more decentralized. I believe all companies will be crypto companies in the future, because everyone, like every industry, will be using blockchains as some part of their infrastructure. I believe that blockchains are simply better infrastructure system for our financial system, and I think this new financial system will become an additional layer to how we use the web itself, and so that will start to just like bleed into every single application and service and company that we interact with. So I think for the on-chain economy, that means it'll just continue to grow and get bigger and get more adoption, and hopefully for the world that means that more people will have access to all these financial services that were reserved for just a few. So yeah, I'm pretty optimistic on just like how Web3 will gradually start to take over most of what we do online.
Yeah, it's like a black hole. Like the gravity of Web3 is so strong that everything will just get sucked into it.
Because it's so easy to just like the whole ecosystem is so interconnected, and it's so easy to plug in to it, that it does have these like powerful network effects where you start using DeFi, but then like social media is also integrated, and and suddenly payments, and then maybe even how you work, if you're working on kind of DAOs, and then suddenly kind of your whole life is Web3. That's kind of how I I
Yeah.
see things
I feel like I live
progressing.
on chain at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
think it'll
Cami,
be like that for most people.
Yeah.
so then do you envision the Defiant also kind of growing in that sense and coverage just expand into literally every crevice of Web3?
Um, with caveats, again, like we want to remain specialized in finance. I don't want to be a journalist news organization. If you look at kind of Web2 TradFi as an analog, we're kind of Bloomberg. We're not CNN. So as long as it's just finance markets, like economy, like on-chain economy related, then we'll cover it. I see our coverage expanding beyond just DeFi to include CeFi, to include TradFi, so that we become just a financial news
Got it.
organization. But yeah, I like things like like politics, or like other areas of coverage will be a lot more limited on the Defiant, as we do want to be specialized in finance.
Got it. So at the Defiant, in your experience as a journalist, what journalistic principles stand true no matter the subject, whether it's crypto or not crypto?
Um, well, I think kind of accuracy above all. Like that's the most important thing. Um, and So journalistic principles: accuracy, um, having balance, so giving a fair opportunity for comment, and like to have um their say to all sides that you're talking to. I think are you know th- those two things, like balance and accuracy, are probably just like what you cannot compromise in, what like for whatever kind of journalism you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Um, and so do you have any other words of wisdom you could give to the rest of crypto media? Like, what do you wish you would see more of in crypto media? Like, what are people doing right or wrong?
Again, like I see a lot of great reporting out there, and I think maybe so. Two things I wish I saw more of is again, like more data backed reporting, like on chain data is missing. I think a lot of the cover, like most of the coverage, is pretty superficial. Um, and then I think we're missing more just people stories for crypto. I think there's just like so many interesting characters and groups, and that gets missed. We focus a lot of kind of on what's happening and not who's behind what's happening. So I wish I and we and we're kind of like we're part of this too. Like we don't cover that many kind of, we don't write that many profiles, because yeah, it's like a bandwidth problem. It's like you default to just like writing about what's happening, and those stories are kind of softer and kind of get left behind, but they're so important. So yeah, those are two things that I'd like to see more.
You kind of see those people stories arise on the narratives that are on Twitter. Like people become main characters in a sense, and sometimes it works out, but a lot of time, the rule about main characters is you never want to become one, because then like main characters always get cut off, or they get
Yeah.
like, that's a common saying. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like if there was like some like vice of crypto to follow, like the people around to these conferences and stuff, it would be like pretty cool to see.
Yep, agree. So yeah, I mean, those are two areas that we definitely want to improve on at the Defiant as well.
Yeah. Do you think the Defiant will ever do something like that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's in our kind of plan. So
Yeah,
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 watch for those.
yeah. Looking forward to it. Kit, do you have any other questions for Cami over here?
No, I just wanted to express to her how much more I respect the Defiant now after chatting with you today and seeing like how stringent you guys are and the standard you guys hold yourself to. It's, you know, it's laudable.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, I'm really proud of what we've built and so excited for what's to come.
Yeah. And so at the end of every interview, we like to do a round of lightning questions. And so Kit has a few, I have a few. And yeah, we'll get this going.
All righty. So, Cami, when was the first time you touched the blockchain? And centralized exchanges don't count.
Oh. Huh. I'm not sure. It was probably 2019. Yeah, like when I like started kind of playing around with DeFi, like maybe it was probably Uniswap or something that I was using.
And second question, what do you do off chain? What is your favorite touch grass activity?
Okay. I love walking around Manhattan and Brooklyn. Yeah, just exploring new neighborhoods, walking with my dog and my husband, you
Conga.
know, grabbing an ice cream.
Wow.
Pretty simple pleasures of life, but I just love exploring the city.
Yeah.
So
What's
wholesome.
very
Yep.
wholesome. What's some advice that you would give to your 5-year younger self?
This is so hard. Keep writing,
Keep
I
writing.
guess. What? Wait, 5 years? I don't know if I was writing at 5-year-old.
No, 5
But
years. No, like 5 years ago.
oh, 5 years ago. Okay. And what was that? I was just coming to New York. Mm, yeah, probably just like eh. uh buy more Bitcoin. Buy more Ethereum.
Yeah,
Yes.
same. We can all say
Same.
that.
Yeah,
Everyone, all
like-
across the board.
Yeah.
Don't listen to your editors and just buy ETH, you know.
Just market buy.
Yeah.
And last question on my end. If you weren't in crypto, what would you be doing with your professional career?
If I wasn't in crypto,
Yeah, and if you weren't
Ah.
writing either, so I'll make it a little
if
bit
I
harder
wasn't
for you.
writing,
Yeah.
that's tough. If I wasn't writing, if I wasn't writing, I would be I'd like to do something with travel. Like maybe I'd be like this vlogger account. They said writing.
Oh my goodness, writing is so ingrained in Cami that
Yeah.
she
It's just
can't
like
think of
content creation. I can't think of
Content creation.
anything.
she can't think of another
So
career
bad.
path.
Travel,
So
content
bad.
creation.
But that's
yeah.
how you know. That's how you know that you're in the right professional career, right? You literally could not think of
It
another
needs
thing
to be
to do.
content. I need to
Yeah.
be creating something.
Yeah.
I don't
And
know, like maybe just like designing or like I don't know, art, like some art or some sort of
creating.
like creative
Curating,
thing.
got it.
Yeah.
and where can people find you on social media?
So Twitter at Cami Russo is the best place.
Nice.
Perfect.
Well,
Thank you so much, Cami.
All right, thank you guys. This was fun.
thanks. See you around. I'll see you at the office.
Yeah, see you soon. Bye.
Ciao. Hey everyone, thanks for watching the latest episode of Flywheel Pod. That was Camila Russo shining through, telling us everything you need to know about the Defiant, their standards, how they determine things as newsworthy, her thoughts on the space and the evolution of the space. I thought, she's been on the ground since 2019 when DeFi was open finance. And so her perspective about the whole evolution of the world on chain has been really interesting and special.
Yeah, man, and I think her background also lends herself to that, right? 8 years at Bloomberg, she got to see all things in TradFi. Like she mentioned, she was in Forex, commodities, like all over the board. And
Yeah.
then, it's no wonder that she finds DeFi so attractive. And remember at the end when we asked her, what else would you be doing? Like, she straight up could not think of anything else to be. So it feels like she's in the right role, sitting on the right seat on the bus. And I'm very excited to see where the Defiant goes from here, especially with their new product, their terminal product coming out too.
Yeah, and I hope she writes another book. Yeah, I really enjoyed The Infinite Machine. I'd love to see a sequel just about DeFi.
Dude, I have it on my bookshelf. I've yet to crack it open, but I just might this weekend.
Yeah, that's the book I recommend to everyone, honestly, if they want to learn about Ethereum. It's just like Infinite Machine. But this was this week's episode of Flywheel Pod. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. Hit that bell to subscribe for all the updates you need. Follow us on Twitter at Flywheelpod. Join our Telegram group at Flywheelpod. You can follow me on Twitter at DeFi Dave 22.
You can follow me at 0xcapital_K.
And we'll see you next time.
Peace.